All right, everybody. My name is Ivan E. Nieto. I am a certified welder through the state of Kentucky and the transportation cabinet. I am going to be giving a very basic surface level safety training on safe work practices and PPE around the welding shop. So before anything else, I want to say that in the world of welding, right, we have different welding processes, but these welding processes have one thing in common, and it's that we use an electrical arc to weld or fuse two pieces of metal together. So that kind of makes us think, right? Like, what are the common hazards involved in welding? Well, we know that we have electrical hazards, right? As I said, we're working with electrical machines. We got fire hazards, and we have radiation hazards. These fire hazards, we're not just talking about gas and diesel fuel, right? We're actually talking about combustible dust, vapors, and fumes. And as far as radiation hazard goes, we're talking about UV lights or ultraviolet lights that are produced by the arc that comes off the welding machine. So let's talk a little bit about electrical hazards, right? As I pointed out, when we are working with a welder, we are working with electricity. And some people might not know this, but our bodies are great conductors of electricity. So when we are welding, we could actually become part of that circuit, and we could actually get electrocuted or receive an electrical shock. Sometimes, when you're deep into the welding business, you might have to perform some repairs or work on a welder. Some of these welders run on 220, 480 volts. So when you have to open up a welder and make repairs, you are being exposed to an arc flash or even an arc blast. Also, we know that when we are welding, we could cause an electrical fire. This mainly happens when we are working in a cluttered or dirty area, and then we are not taking the proper safety procedures, right? And sometimes these fires might even cause an explosion. A few years ago, we had a local factory that had I think it was a vast amount of combustible dust inside the factory, and it actually blew up, causing I think 4 fatalities, and numerous people got hurt. So that kind of brings me to the fire hazards, right? So we know that when we are welding, we are using or we're producing sparks and molten metal. A good safe work practice is to always keep a fire extinguisher ready and handy if anything was to go wrong, right? We always need to be careful when we are welding, as I mentioned before, of our work area. We need to make sure that there are no combustibles around, right? I think the OSHA mandates that when we are welding, there should be zero combustible materials around the workplace. So we need to take that in consideration. Also, as I mentioned before, combustible dust could potentially ignite and explode and cause a big fire. When we're talking about radiation hazards, and like I said, this is very surface level. I'm not going to go in depth in any of these. If not, we will be here all day. When we're talking about radiation hazards, we are talking about the UV or ultraviolet lights that come out of the arc that's produced by the welder. For those of you that don't know, these rays could produce burns, eye burns, skin burns, could even produce cancer, long-term and even short-term effects. So that's why you'll see some welders use leather jackets and just thick clothing to prevent that stuff from happening, or just lower the rate of it. Another common hazard that we can see in welding is gases, vapors, and fumes, right? Some people use respirators when they are welding. I know that is not always possible, but we know that when we are welding inside a booth, we need to make sure that we have an extractor, fume extractor, and that we have the area is well ventilated. I know that that might not fall under PPE. It might fall under engineering controls, but I think it's just part of safe work practices. We have to be real careful sometimes because, as I said, it depends on the type of metal that we are welding and the type of filler metal that we're using. We could produce a toxic fume. So we might be exposed to suffocation. We might be exposed to an infection on the respiratory tract and other types of harmful effects. I've always said this. When we in any kind of workplace, when it pays off to be neat and organized. I think that 50 or even more than that percent of work hazards could be resolved if we keep a neat and organized work area, right? If we keep our area clean and neat, we are mitigating slip, trip, and fall hazards and things like that. So let's talk a little bit about the personal protection equipment used in welding. We have obviously our welding helmets, and it depends on what kind of process you'll be doing. You probably have to get a different type of shade for the welding helmet. It goes from a 13 all the way down to a 1 or 2, if I'm not mistaken. We have leather gloves, right? Because we're going to be handling hot pieces of metal and sharp pieces of metal. I always recommend using insulated rubber gloves underneath these leather gloves to keep any kind of electricity, like I said, electrical arc, out of harm's way. Keeps us out of harm's way. Safety glasses or safety goggles, that's a mandate everywhere. And also the use of a face shield. When we're in a welding shop, like I said, we're going to be working with a lot of metal. We're going to be doing a lot of grinding and a lot of cutting metal and things like that. So we need to make sure that we protect our eyes. So we need safety glasses and a safety shield. We also can use a safety or a leather jacket, and a leather cap, right, to protect us from slags, sparks, potential fires, catching our clothing on fire, and things like that. One thing that I didn't mention is that when we wear this clothing, it can't be frayed. We need to always be, like I said, be neat and keep our PPE in good and proper working condition. These are some of the fume and vapor extractors that we should use when we are in the welding shop or we are welding inside a booth. As I mentioned before, right, when we are welding, we are producing toxic fumes and gases. So as a good safe work practice, it's a good idea to keep the area well ventilated. I know that at some point and sometimes it might be a double-edged sword, because especially if we're doing MIG welding or TIG welding, we don't want the extractor to blow away our shielding gas, right? And because it could ruin our work. But we need to keep those extractors close by, and just to mitigate the possibility of combustible dust and vapors and such. One of the things about welding, and I think everybody knows this, it's that when you weld, it's going to get hot. It's going to get hot real fast. So good safe work practice would be to, keep hydrated, drink plenty of fluids, and if you can, wear a cold towel or cool rag. I think they sell those at the hardware store. Wear one of those around your neck if possible. I know that we had a colleague that was working at a booth, and we forgot to check on him, and when we went back, he was passed out, and did not have a pulse. He had suffered a heat stroke, and we ended up having to call the paramedics on him. So it's easy. It's easy if you don't watch it. It's easy to end up with these symptoms. And so what can we do, right? So like I said before, we need to stay hydrated. We need to take our breaks. Use cool rags or towels when possible, right? So what happens when an employee starts showing those symptoms? Well, we need to take this employee outside. We need to help him out and take off some of those layers of clothing. We need to help him hydrate slowly. And obviously, we need to seek medical attention. One of the things about welding, and some people might know about this, but it's that you'll be in an awkward position for most of the time you are welding. So it's very easy to hyperextend a muscle or pull a muscle. Also, it's a as far as a good safe work practice, it's a good thing to stretch before you start welding, and just make sure that you are comfortable when you are welding. It takes a toll on your body. So, if you want to keep doing this type of work for a long, long time, then we need to start taking care of our bodies. I think that that's as far as I go with my training. I thank everybody for listening to me today, and I will be giving out a post-test quiz after this training, just to see what you all have learned and what things we might need to work on in the future. Thank you so much, and y'all have a good day.